Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Tosh Customs and today we will be going over my custom Saint Batman figure, otherwise known as Azrael. This version of Azrael is his Saint Batman design, which I'll be honest, I can't tell if it ever showed up in the comics. I think it did once or twice in like some alternate universe, Dark Multiverse Batman. But the customer originally just wanted to work within Azrael and just make an Azrael figure. And I ended up showing him this design and he was like, yeah, let's run it. And let's also, make it more our own. And so there are definitely some original design elements in here and finding a way to bring this character to life on a figure. I feel like that's always what I'm doing, trying to put my own spin on things. And I think this guy turned out really, really incredible. He has a very involved design, and there's a lot of original sculpting that had to go onto this guy. And so I'm realizing now that I forgot to bring a Supreme Knight over here to show you the difference in the heads. So I'll do that and I'll be right back. So as you can see, I brought my Supreme Knight head in here. We'll be looking at this when we talk about the sculpt of the Azrael head, but for now I can put it to the side. And I can take this whole figure and I can also put him to the side because we're going to talk about accessories. And honestly, there's not many accessories because this character doesn't carry too much in general. He is himself, and his sword. And so we're going to take a look at the hands first. These hands are from the Sovereign Knight Mezco figure, and they've been repainted. And so we have this really nice glossy red paint, this metallic glossy red. And so I painted the tops of the hands a silver chrome, and then after that I washed it in black, and after I washed it with black paint, then I sprayed it with red. And so that's how you have those nice deep grooves and those blacks, but they're not too overpowering, and they're also not changing the overall tint of the red, because if I sprayed it red first and then did a black wash, it would actually muddy the red color, and I didn't want to do that. I wanted the red parts to be really, really true red. And so I washed first and then sprayed red, and it turned out really, really nice. And then if you look at photos of Saint Batman, his fingers, they're gauntlets, and so he has segmented fingers with armor plating over them. And so I did paint all the hands with those segmented fingers with that chrome silver armor. And so I think that turned out really well. And I did my best just to like lightly dry brush it so it gets this worn feel, and so it's not super, super crisp and clean on there. So those are the hands out of the way. Oh, in terms of the hands we are using, we're not using the full set of Sovereign Knight hands. We have the open palm gesturing ones, we have the gripping ones, and then we have the fisted ones currently equipped on the figure, because that's all Azrael needs. He doesn't throw batarangs. He doesn't shoot anything, so he didn't need the trigger fingers either, so we kept him to the ones that would be useful for him. But the weapon he does use is his gigantic sword. And so this is from the McFarlane Azrael figure, and I did repaint the sword. I left the blade alone because we did have the fire sliding over it, and so I didn't want there to be any paint rub or anything like that, so I left the blade alone. But the hilt I did repaint, and so I ran a black wash over the whole thing. And so before the top of this hilt, like the grip area that you could grip it with the second hand, almost like the palm guard, it was just this flat gold and this maroon color, and it just didn't have a lot of contrast with it. And I'll be 100% honest, I didn't even see the crucifix sculpted into this originally because everything was just so flat overall. I mean, had I paid attention, I would have seen it, but just on first glance, I was like, oh, it's just gold. It's just this gold cross type thing. And then when I blackwashed, I actually realized that there was this crucifix sculpted into it, which I think is an incredible detail, and props to McFarlane on that. So I blackwashed everything as well as the hilt and the pommel. And so it looks a lot better now, and it gives it much more of a worn and dirtied look, which is something that we'll see throughout the figure. Nothing about this guy was supposed to be super, super crisp and clean. I wanted to make him feel like he had seen battle and he had been through a lot, and to, in many ways tell his story through his suit of armor. And so, dirtying this up was just part of that. The other thing I did, since I was spraying a lot of translucent or clear red over the figure for all his different metallic red parts, I did make the fire a little bit more red. I just angled the fire at different places, and I just sprayed some clear red onto it. If you guys are familiar with this fire effect, you'll know that it is mostly yellow with hints of orange. And so I took those areas of orange and I sprayed some red onto them. And so I made the orange turn to more of a red, and the yellow in turn sort of faded into some more orange in certain areas. And so now you get a much, much deeper, richer fire effect, and I think it has a much higher contrast against the blade now, which looks really, really nice on camera and really, really nice in person. So that's the sword. I love it, and yeah, it's just cool. I really, really like McFarlane for having this sliding flame effect. Yeah, just great work on their part, and it was really, really fun to repaint. So putting that off to the side, we are going to bring in the Saint Batman Azrael figure, and I'm going to stand him right there, and I'm going to bring my camera up just a little bit so we can look him in the eyes. This guy was a monster to build, and both monster in size and monster in labor. I think this might be the most original sculpting I've ever done for a figure, or definitely very close to the most for a Mezco for sure. The chest plate is completely original sculpt. The character has these almost like strands of cloth coming off of his cape in the original design, and so I made them a lot more dramatic and created this whole collar piece right here. And so all of this is original sculpt, and so I had to individually make sure all of these almost like feather cape scraps were all going in different directions and look very unique. And then he also, in the photos that I found, has these tubes that run from his back to his neck, and so I also sculpted all those, and as you can see, all of those are floating and holding their own position as well. And so definitely a lot of labor going into this whole neck piece. The head is a completely original sculpt, as well as the gauntlets have been original sculpted, this tiered armor plating up top. And so yeah, very, very labor intensive, but I'm super proud with how he turned out. So we're going to start with the head. I'm going to pop the head off, and we're going to zoom in and take a closer look here. I'll just leave the body standing off to the side. So taking a look at the head, this is the original head it was based off a Supreme Knight Batman head. And so what I did was I completely covered the face with sculpt. And originally all I did was just, I originally just did the mouth. I covered the mouth up so that it would be like a smooth plate. And then what I did after that was I covered up the eyes and smoothed it out to the top of the head. So, you know, all the cloth is still soft. So then what I had to do was I had to put in my cross lines as well as dig out areas for his new eyes. And so I had to dig out these new eyes and also punch deeper holes into where his, you know, pupils would actually be. And so a real pain to make, if I'm being honest. I'm so glad it turned out well, and the sculpting was super, super fun to design and to sculpt, but it was very, very painstaking in terms of making sure the head looked symmetrical and even, and also scary and worn. I had to sculpt in a lot of little extra scratches and stuff. Let me get this camera to focus. A lot of extra scratches and stuff into the armor, and working almost like on this little like skull motif around the mouth, as well as putting a lot of scratches and scars around the eyes and cutting across the top of the helmet. And so a lot of little details to make this head come to life, as well as sculpting these extra little staple bits around the helmet, which is an interesting little design cue that I saw from the comic pictures. And so had to totally transform the head. And so then after I sculpted everything up, I painted everything, I dry brushed everything a chrome silver, washed it all in black, you know, just like the hands, sprayed it in the red So we get that nice deep metallic, but also kind of worn red. And then after that, I took glossy black paint and dropped it into the eyes and washed it over the cracks of the face, and then painted in my gold and painted in the eyes and the little staples. This head took me quite a bit because getting the face shape to be right and getting it all to make sense and to look proportional took a good amount of time. But I'm very, very happy with how it turned out. I think he is incredibly menacing and scary to look at, and ultimately that's the goal. He's a scary character when you think about it. So, coming back to the main body, I'll pop the neck off for now. There's not much to talk about in terms of this neck sculpt besides the fact that it's very labor intensive. What I had to do was sculpt all these little cape flecks out. So what I started with was actually I made a base layer of sculpt that circled around the neck, because the neck piece naturally has some indentations. And let me bring another Batman figure into reference. So this is my sort of like rebirth Batman. But as you can see, there's a lot of like dents inside the neck, and it does sort of have like this shoulder crease right here, you know, where the neck goes to like more the shoulder, main torso areas, like his lats and stuff like that. And because there is that angle there, it wouldn't make sense to start sculpting those feathery cloth strips, because all of them would sort of indent on that angle. So I actually sculpted in a whole ring of sculpt around that side of the neck there, right around that line, so that it filled in that area. So then I had much more of a flat, stable surface to work on. So then after that, I started from the back and moved my way forward, because I wanted the utmost piece of like this feathering or this, cape scraps to be on the top. If I worked front backwards, they would be stacking up awkwardly. So I worked from the back to the front so that everything stacked in order. And then I also sculpted these little pins, like these little, buttons right here on the top. So that's done in leather brown with some gold highlights over it for the buttons. And so this whole feathering thing, not even the pipes, but just the feathering, took me about 2 hours right there, because they're such thin pieces of sculpt that they kept on drooping. So as they were drying, I had to sit there and watch them and keep on curling them back up and keeping them from falling so that they would dry in place. So, sculpting was like an hour in of itself, and then over like, the next little bit as it was hardening, I had to keep on propping them back up. So, once again, as I said about this character, very labor intensive, but very worth it. After that, I came to the back and sculpting the tubes. It took some time, but it wasn't overall too difficult. So I sculpted these ports at the bottom of the neck that are picked out in silver. I sculpted the ports, and then I sculpted this sort of like top pack area. As you can see, there's ports up top that the tubes are going into. And then after that, it was just rolling, tubes of sculpt and sort of winding them around each other and then plugging them in. And then actually the bottoms of a lot of all 4 of these have been super glued in, so that they're a little bit more secure, so that like I can flick them around and they're not going to disconnect or whatever. So super glued those in for extra security. The cape was a custom cape sent by the customer, actually. So it was a custom cape that he had on his Sovereign Knight Batman figure that he sent me. And so I repainted it with a leather brown, or not a leather brown, sorry, a leather red, which is Angelus leather paint. And I've talked about it many, many times before. It's such great paint to have, whether you're going to use it on actual fabric or you're just going to use it on your figures in general. It's a very, very flexible and durable paint, so I can't recommend it enough. I talk about it all the time. Use it. I sprayed Angelus leather red on this cape to get that nice burnt red color across it, and it just looks beautiful. And this cape is really good quality. It's a very, very heavy fabric, and so the wires are strong, so it holds itself up, but it feels like it has weight to it as well, which I really like. Some Mezco capes can feel very thin and light and flimsy. This one feels very regal, if that's a fitting word. So coming back to the front, let's keep on working down the body. Coming to the shoulders, these are from red arrow or arsenal Mezco figures. If you guys remember, probably about 2 years ago now, I worked on a lot of Deathstroke figures, and their legs, they use the arsenal legs. And so, but I had to cut off the tops of the knee pads for all of them. And so I had a bunch of these knee pads sitting around. And so I ended up using elastic to turn them into these tiered shoulder pads here. So as you can see, both of them move independently because they're on elastic, and they're flexible so that when the arm picks up or moves forward, they bend with it, they don't get stuck. And so very, very cool. Very, very cool stuff there. So that's how I did the shoulders. These have also been repainted. So once again, as always, done dry brushed or painted black, dry brushed silver, black washed again, and then sprayed with the red, and then I hand painted into the cracks so that the black lines were more defined in there. Coming to the chest plate here, this is all original sculpt. And so if you've seen any of my videos before, you've probably heard me talk about original sculpting for a figure, which is, building a completely new piece of armor or something with no base to it. And so in this case, I did that for the chest piece. And so, the Supreme Knight figure doesn't have a chest plate. And I didn't have one that really fit that sort of Saint Batman religious knight vibe. And so I sculpted it myself. So as always, I took painter's tape and taped off the body and then made just sort of a base blob sculpt over the area I wanted it to cover. Once that base layer was dried, I peeled it off the painter's tape and carved out the sides and really, defined the area that the plate was going to be on. After that, I put a smoothing layer of sculpt over it because the original sculpt was very, very bumpy, obviously, because of the painter's tape and bending around fabric. And so I smoothed it, put a new layer of sculpt over it. And then after that, I sculpted in this rimmed edge as well as the bat symbol that sat inside. And in terms of painting it, painted everything silver, black washed it, and then hand painted this gold in, and then sprayed this red edge, and then just had to clean up some of the silver where there was some overspray. And so, this chest I think this chest was about 4 sculpting sessions total to get it all done and all cut right and even. And so, as always, very, very labor intensive, very, very worth it. Coming down to the ab plate and also this whole suit section right here. If you'll notice, this is not standard Supreme Knight suit. This is actually from the PX Night Monkey Spider-Man. This is his vest that he wears. I'm using a Night Monkey for another figure that I'm working on right now, but we only wanted the chest plate for it. So I had this whole extra lower part of the vest that did have this wonderful, nice patterning on it, as well as these straps. And so I ended up taking that and sliding it up the Supreme Knight body. And so now it's like this little undershirt layer around the abdomen that also adds these nice straps with these gold buckles to it. Obviously, this has all been repainted. And so that also helped to differentiate this figure from the standard Supreme Knight figure, because that's something I struggle with, especially since I'm using Mezco bodies, is how in the world can I take this figure that already exists and really, really transform it so it looks nothing like how it started. I don't want someone to look at a figure and go, oh, I can pick out all these different parts. I know exactly where all that came from. My goal is to make it look completely new. If you can tell, what parts came from where without me telling you, then either you're really good or I haven't done my job properly. And so really worked to transform this guy. And so taking this suit and breaking up the standard Supreme Knight body really, really helped with that. Coming back to the abdominal plate, though, this is from the Cable figure, the Cable Mezco figure, the standard one with his armor. This is his ab plate, but I sculpted this whole new layer of this tiered armor, as you can see here, and it's got got black wash, so you can see all the nice cracks and wear and scratches that I sculpted into it. And then I also sculpted these little leather straps on the sides here with these gold, camera shake, with these gold buckles. And so just to add some more detail into it and to continue to fit with the design. Coming down to the belt here, this is from the Sovereign Knight figure. And I cut out these leather strips from an old cape I had and hand painted them red, and so you get this nice dirtied up red look for the skirt. Something interesting that I normally do, I normally put elastic, hold on, let me refocus the camera here as I pull this cape up. I normally have elastic running from the belt all the way around the figure. I don't have it in this case, and the reason why, also, this is also painted in silver, as you can see. The back is also painted in silver, so I didn't miss the details. Just because it's under the cape, it's still painted. We don't miss here. But I normally do have elastic around the belt, and I have it secured by elastic. The reason why I didn't this time is because elastic makes a very, very hard connection and keeps the belt very, very tight. And with this thigh armor and with everything else going on in the suit, there's a lot of like over the suit armor components on this guy. And it just turned out that there's a lot of clashing with that. And so instead of having elastic that would actually hold the belt too hard in place, I just glued the buckle to the front of the suit. And so as you'll see, what that allows it to do is actually the belt will flex up. Like look at the sides of the belt here as I tuck the, don't want that, there we go. As like I move this leg out, you'll notice that the belt moves with it. And so, or as I kick up, the belt kind of pushes up and forward with it. And so all of that to help the articulation better. And so having it glued up here and leaving the sides to be flexible really, really worked out. And also this is glued to the, like this under abdominal vest. And so it's not even the main suit that it's flexing with, it's flexing with the oversuit. And so that helps with giving it a nice range of motion. I haven't talked about this yet, but over the whole suit, we do have this mesh. You know, this is just the standard Supreme Knight suit, and I dyed it black, which is how you can see all those nice little black dots underneath, because normally the suit is gray with gray rubberized material over it, or rubberized patterning, so you don't really get to appreciate all the detail in the suit. But in this case, I dyed it so you get that contrast. And then I dry brushed the whole suit with a chrome silver. And so it starts to look like chainmail. For instance, like on the inside of the skirt, you get a little bit of that chainmail metal shine. You get it all in the arms up here and stuff like that. So that was an important detail because he is a knight. And so using that, you know, using that existing patterning to get across that feel. Coming down to the legs here, we're using tactical Batman legs. These have been repainted. We're keeping with the theme, so we have these gold buckles, we have the leather brown on the straps, and then these have been painted black and then dry brushed with a chrome silver over it to keep with the overall color scheme. And then coming down to the legs here, we're using black bolt knee pads, and we have this sort of red to silver fade that's going on throughout all these armor components. And in the original design from the comic, they are very, very hard line red to silver stripes or red to white stripes. And I didn't like that because they were so straight and clean. It didn't make sense for armor. You know, if armor's taken into battle, if you have painted it, it's going to get scratched up. It's going to get dirtied. And so instead of making them very, very clean defined lines, I instead went for this fade where I sprayed the red and then I dry brushed some silver over it so that there was this, as you can see, there's like the deep silver or the deep metallic red, and then there's this silver fade out coming into the main area that is silver. And so all of that was just to make sure that the armor felt much more authentic and much more worn. I really don't think clean, hard lines would have fit the legs very well. And these are Deathstroke boots that have been repainted. The internal leg is also from Deathstroke, so I did switch that out from the Supreme Knight. So as you can see here, even the tops of the boots share that same red to the like silver edges over the top of the boot, as well as this ankle plate. So everything is following the color scheme very, very well. Coming up to the arms here, I brought in these leather straps. These are also just parts of the cape that I looped around the arms and glued down, and they have these little tassel bits that are coming out off the side here. And so, you know, just kind of free flying loose. They just look like straps that have been pulled around the arm. And so I think that's a nice little detail and also helps break up the arm from the silver. Because I think looking at, if this had all been silver, it would be very, very boring. And so those leather straps do help to break up all the chrome in there. And then coming down to the gauntlets here, I re-sculpted this whole top section. And so now it has more of that tiered look and that, angled, pointy look to match these shoulder pads. And so these, they pull design cues from each other. And I also did sculpt in cracks and stuff just like the abdominal plate. And so you get these nice deep dark black scratches in there as well with the tiered layers of armor. And then his little bat blades, little blades off the side of his gauntlet are done in a chrome silver. The original design of this guy has these gigantic arm blades on him, and quite honestly, it's just unrealistic to fight with. They're just way too large to be advantageous. They'd add more weight to your suit, and they'd probably snag on things, if not your opponent grabbing them and actually pulling you by them. And so I was thinking about sculpting new ones, but ultimately these short ones make a lot more sense and serve much more utility than big ones would. With that, I want to also talk about how to make a character feel bulky without really changing his size. This is just the Supreme Knight body, but he looks a lot thicker and more built out. And all of that is to the design and proportions and the direction of kind of all our colors. As if you look at this guy, you'll notice that there's a lot of angles, but also in some ways very smooth angles. All of our pieces here, they have curves to them. Everything here largely is curved or has some, even if you even look at the knee pads here, the red fade is coming down in a curve. It's not a hard angle, it's a curve. All of these points, they all have a curve to it. And so in that way, it doesn't feel super, super angular. The design doesn't feel angular or geometric because geometric and angular feels clunky. Smooth lines and curves make the character feel faster and lighter. And so I didn't want this guy's armor to make him feel weighted down. So then, how do you make him feel sizable? Well, what we're doing visually here is we have a lot of angles pointing inward. And so you have this bat symbol that points inward. You have the abdominal plate that points inward. Even the skirt, it has shorter edges up on the sides and they point down toward longer angles. All the boots, everything is sort of arrow pointing down. And so in that way, you get this flow of this figure where it's like wide shoulders and everything narrows in around the direction of the body. And so in that way, even though visually all I've really added is some shoulder pads that jut out a little bit, he feels so much bigger. And just to show that, I'm going to bring in this Batman figure here. Once again, same size, same body, relatively the same height as well. Let me get him to stand straight. There we go. But the visual difference is this Batman, looks a lot smaller. Granted, black is a slimming color as well, but it's using all those angles, all those points to visually kind of direct your eyes so that it makes the shoulders feel very, very wide. And then, even the shoulders are curving in, curving in, curving in, curving in, curving in. And so, when you're designing your figures and, the bodies haven't changed at all. I really haven't changed much of the internals. But the whole look of the figure is very different. Also, these feathers up here, or like these cape scraps, do add a lot of drama to the look of the figure. And so in that way, he gets a much more imposing look because he feels, like there's much more going on up here. It's not just a head and a neck, but this space has been filled out. And so it makes him look like he has bigger lats, which in turn, playing off the wider shoulders or the wider shoulder plates, make him feel like he has much more muscle up here on the top. So he looks stronger and feels more menacing, even though really proportion-wise, nothing has changed at all. With that, I'm gonna switch his hands out and have him carrying his sword so that you guys can see what that looks like in the video. And then I think we'll wrap up. So hopefully you guys have learned something through this. I mean, I talk about original sculpting a lot, and I realize that's just something that you have to kind of do and experiment yourselves. I hope you guys are able to do that at home because I think it's a really, really cool skill to build and something that really allows you to be much more creative with your figures. This guy was an absolute pleasure to make. Took a very, very long time. but I'm super, super happy with how he turned out. He looks incredibly menacing and very strong and powerful too. I need I need something to have him stand on so that he's like conquering and raising his war sword. I don't have anything for him to stand on though. Oh well, he'll just stand straight then. He'll just stand straight and look crazy. Just like that. Cool. So with that, thank you all for watching this review. Once again, I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed it. If so, please drop a like on the video, leave any comments. I always appreciate them and I read them all. Not that there's many, but I do read them all. And if you guys want to see more of my process and what I'm doing, I post work in progress photos relatively consistently on my Instagram page. And so if you want to check me out on Instagram, and that's where I'm much more active, I have my username in the description of this video. It is Tosh_customs. And if you want a link directly to my page, it is in the About section of my channel. And there's a link that'll take you straight to my page so you can check me out there. I think that ties up all my closing remarks. So thank you once again for watching, and I will catch you all later.